This is starting to get a trend, isn't it, ladies and gentlemen? Good day. 10 bloody years since Wolfenstein the New Order came out? Come on, people, what's going on here? Is like linear time a thing now or something? Oh, dearie me. Back in 2014, I was blown away by the gameplay and story in Wolfenstein the New Order. It was literally unlike anything I'd ever seen. It combined the great gameplay of the past with the great narrative potential of the future. And back then, I said that Wolfenstein the New Order was the best first-person shooter ever made. Well, is it still? Or was it ever? Let's take a deep dive into Wolfenstein and take a look.
Wolfenstein The New Order was developed by Machine Games and published by Bethesda on May 20th, 2014 for the PC and the major consoles. According to some sources, this game was a retool of a Dieselpunk game that Machine Games was already working on, and I can kind of see this. There are some places and plot points in the game that feel a little out of place, but despite this, Wolfenstein New Order is not a remake, nor is it a continuity reboot, and is instead a direct sequel to Wolfenstein 2009, a criminally underrated Wolfenstein game, and despite Wolfenstein 2009 getting panned by everyone, including me, Machine Games stuck close to that game's continuity, and many of the characters from that game make a return. What made Wolf New Order really stand out in 2014 was how it was a game. Yeah, even 10 years ago, people were getting sick of cutscene simulators and the two-weapon rule. What Wolf's New Order brought to the table was classic-inspired gameplay, and a lot of it. This was one of the few games that was able to balance narrative and gameplay. This game has a bunch of cutscenes, but they never outlast their welcome, and the game never locks you in a room where an NPC blathers exposition. This game never takes control from the player during important moments, and thank Ysmir, the game gives you no QTEs when you fight a boss. When you fight a boss, you shoot him till he dies. The enemies are intelligent and varied, although you primarily will be blasting through whole graduating classes of Lancers. The game features levels instead of gutty arenas. Oh, and you never get any goddamn walking simulators either. This game feels like it was from 2004 and not 2014. When you start up the game, it's 1946, but then after the first mission, you transition to the year 1960. Due to this, the weapons are divided by time period. Your first weapon is a Thompson-ish kind of gun. It appears for only one level, and it's adequate. And I wonder if this timeline is the worst timeline, because it looks an awful lot like the Thompson submachine gun in 30 Carbine, a rifle so heavy that only a Sherman tank like BJ Blazkowicz could actually lift it. You then got your standard pistol, rifle, and shotgun, both single and double barrel, sniper, and your knife. You can get some grenades, but these seem less useful than they should be. Your pistols are Lugers in the 40s, and later in the 60s, you have some Space Lugers. The pistols do not outlive their usefulness, as they can be equipped with a suppressor, and that allows you to take out enemies silently. The rifle in 1946 is the Sturmgewehr 44, and in 1960, it's an evil version of the G3. Early in the game, you can find a double-barreled shotgun, and it's good for taking down drones and splattering goose steppers. The auto-shotty is found later in the game, and it's good for bosses and for clearing rooms. In this game, you can dual-wield weapons, and letting off dual auto-shotties helps open up recruitment in the Waffen-SS. The sniper is a sniper, but has an awesome alt-fire where it turns into a laser rifle. You cannot toggle the laser rifle function until you get it on Dermond. And speaking of lasers, in the game, you get the Laser Kraftwerk. It starts out as a little device for cutting through chicken wire, but as you play the game, you collect more and more upgrades for it until it becomes a boss-killing beast of a weapon. This game is rock bloody hard, lads and lasses. You do good damage with all your weapons, but the enemies come in huge numbers and they can take a few hits and hurt. The game is balanced well, and the devs knew how to give you a challenge without it becoming a slog. Unlike most games in 2014 and today, you do not have regenerative health. Instead, you have health packs and armor. While regenerative health is not entirely a deal breaker and some games can use it well, a well-balanced game with non non-regenerative health is more fun. With non-regenerative health, your health stays down. Now, Wolfenstein kind of fudges it a little bit, and it has your health regenerate up to 20 points, but even then, you're only going to be taking 1 or 2 hits. This means that the difficulty is much more dynamic than in regenerative health games. In a regenerative health game, your health regenerates back up to full health points, whereas in a game with health packs, it stays down, and when it's down, that difficulty goes up. Fighting the enemy is a legitimate challenge, and thus it's fun. You actually have to try, and so when you clear a level, you feel a sense of accomplishment. Wolf New Order encourages the use of stealth, and since the enemies are actually pretty tough, stealth is a fun option, as the more stealthy you are, the less enemies you have to fight, and thus the less saves you have to reload. The stealth works pretty bloody well, and is balanced in favor of the player. No Far Cry laser vision here. So long as you try a little bit, you can stealth and stab enemies in the neck with your knife. The better you play, the more perks you unlock. You don't pick a perk, but instead you gotta get a certain number of kills with a weapon to unlock them, and this will make the game a lot easier. But as you progress through the game, the enemies will get a lot harder too. You can get a couple of weapon upgrades, with the best being the rocket launcher for your evil G3. This will make short work of those bastard Space Marine knockoffs that serve as mini-bosses. The game does encourage a little exploration, as you can find health upgrade statues here and there, and believe me, you're going to want to find those, especially as the enemies get better and better armed and armored. An aspect of the story and gameplay that feels kind of vestigial are the timelines and the lockpicking. At the start of the game, you gotta pick an ally, and which one you pick will determine some plot beats and what lockpicking minigame you get. Since there is literally no reason whatsoever to pick anyone other than the cool Scottish dude named Fergus, there's not much of a choice. The devs could have cut the choice entirely and focus on other aspects of the game, and the lockpicking is done less than like 10 times in the entire game, so that's not even worth choosing either. The gameplay for Wolfenstein The New Order was a breath of fresh air to all of us back then. It was a game that finally remembered that gameplay was supposed to be the point of playing the bloody game. This gameplay, despite being developed a number of years after the Golden Age, is fun, fast-paced, and plentiful, and is some of the best in the entire first-person shooter genre. Even though this game came out 10 bloody years ago, this has not aged at all. In fact, it looks a little bit better than some of these modern activist games. There are some bad textures to be found, so it's kind of a mixed bag in some places. Sometimes the game looks really good, and sometimes it looks like it was made as a budget game. Likely this graphical spottiness is due to the fact that this was another game entirely before it became Wolfenstein. The PC port is, in a word, scheisse. At the time of its release, it ran on my PC, but that was only due to my veneration of the machine god. Many people couldn't run the game at all, and those that could often had a bunch of problems. Thankfully, by lighting the sacred incense and whispering many imprecations to the Omnissiah, I had no issues whatsoever. Then, in 2016, I tried to play it. Ooh boy, it crashed all the time, and it became unplayable when it crashed the instant I looked at a random chain. It wouldn't be until I got a new video card that I could run the bloody game at all, and even then I started getting problems. We got texture pop-in and a bunch of crashes to desktop, but thankfully the game was finishable. But for a AAA game of this quality, you would think it would have been better programmed. Sound for the game is so good, you would think it was from back in 04. Guns, enemies, and menus all sound great and iconic. VA work, oh, it was nothing short of groin-grabbingly transcendent. William Joseph Blazkowicz now talks all throughout the game. Originally, he was silent, and in Wolf 2009, he talked only during the cutscenes. Here, he will give a running commentary, and it is some of the best writing in a first-person shooter ever. He is voiced by industry legend Brian Bloom. Now, back in 2014, I had no idea who this guy even was, but I was still super impressed by his voice work, and he is by far the best voice actor for Mr. Blasky to date. And it's no wonder that Mr. Bloom did such a good job, because he has an entire career made up of voicing badasses. In 2012, he voiced Jackie Estacado in the criminally underrated game Darkness 2, and outside of gaming, he voiced Captain America himself in the criminally underrated animated series Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes. For Wolfenstein New Order, Mr. Bloom brings his Captain America game, and I get the feeling that the devs were going for that, as BJ is basically Captain America without his mighty shield. But who needs a mighty shield when you got a mighty laser craft? Now, every mighty hero needs a vile villain. Now, most of the villains that BJ goes up against get turned into a fine red paste, but But in Return to Castle Wolfenstein, one got away. William Death's Head Strassi. Somehow he did not die, but instead he flew away on a Natter rocket plane? Yeah, I'm not sure that would have been my first choice of an escape plane, but whatever. Death's Head becomes a major villain in Wolfenstein 2009, and somehow he survived that game. Now, he is basically Captain America's main villain, Red Skull. He has a creepy grin on his face, and is now voiced by the even more legendary Dwight Howling Mad Murdoch Schultz of A-Team and Star Trek The Next Generation fame. He also cameoed in Star Trek Voyager, but whatever. Most of the time, Mr. Schultz plays goofballs. Here, he turns in what is possibly his best acting performance of all time. He does a tremendous job at bringing the vileness of Death's Head to life. Just have a listen.
Captain Luskowitz. I know a lot about you. We have the same name, you and I. William. But you call me Death's Head. I don't like it. I'm a happy man. You see? It doesn't sound right in English. Say it correctly.
Absolutely chilling. Mr. Schultz steals every scene he is in, and if you thought Vas Montenegro from Far Cry 3 was scary, that dude ain't got nothing on Death's Head. The rest of the voice actors also turn in cinema-grade performances as well, and this game is one of the few games to have a movie-quality cast with the gameplay to match. Back in 2014, I had never even heard the name Mick Gordon. Sure, it's household now, but back then, not so much. The OST for Wolfenstein New Order is a musical reflection of the game itself. Wolf New Order is able to divide itself between tear-jerking seriousness and balls-to-the-wall fun, and the OST reflects this. The title track might as well be the theme for Mr. Blazkowicz himself. BJ is a badass, but he is basically only kicking ass and taking names on willpower alone, and he has been ground down by a lifetime of war. The title track is rocking, but it also is pretty slow and conjures up thoughts of endurance despite impossible odds. The rest of the tracks are also kick-ass, and while the OST does not have quite as many memorable tracks as the Doom OSTs, I feel that the Wolf New Order OST has more humanity to it. With that in mind, we got a top-tier story here, people. As stated earlier, we got a story that is able to be super serious and go places Wolfenstein has never been before, but is also fun and funny. It is filled to the brim with memorable characters and great moments. Wolfenstein has always been a bit of an alternate history setting, what with Mecha Addy and all, but it's always been assumed that all the Gestapo slang was all hidden from the world post-war, and that the conflict went much like it did in real life. In Wolf 2009, we started to see some diversion from real history, what with the giant battle zeppelins that the Germans never actually used in World War II. Here in Wolf New Order, we have moved away from paranormal stuff like demon primarchs, as was seen in Return to Castle Wolfenstein, and have now fully embraced dieselpunk. With this in mind, we gotta ignore the historical inaccuracies as they are not important to the story, and do you want to see shooty Captain America kick the shit out of a xenomorph robodog or not? The game itself begins in the year 1946, a year after the real war ended. You see, in this game, the Germans somehow freed the Void Dragon on Mars, and thus they were able to invent a lot of new tech and have been pushing back the Allies on all fronts. Somehow, BJ Blazkowicz and a cool dude named Fergus are leading an airborne assault on William Death's Head Strassi's Doom Fortress. These planes are really bloody silly, but remember, dieselpunk. The opening part of the game is very scripted, but it doesn't go on nearly as long as you think it does. In fact, it's only like maybe 5 or 6 minutes, and it really does set the tone pretty well. However, the second you get control, and the second you get to actually do anything, you immediately run into a roadblock. So remember when I said there are parts of this game that seemed really out of place? Well, literally in the first 10 minutes, you gotta shoot under a door and the keyboard command or controller button press shows up on screen for like a second, and you find yourself just grinding up against a door for 5 minutes until you figure the bastard out. And the worst part is, you never need to do this again. I guess it was left in as cutting it out might break some of the code or whatever. Anyway, the Doom Fortress fight is still good no matter what, and it's also pretty graphically impressive. Eventually, you meet up with Fergus and climb up the side of the Death Castle, and this is one of the most impressive parts of the bloody game. What's really cool is that this bit gets juxtaposed with the seriousness of the situation. One of your men gets blasted by a socialist, and BJ monologues about it. The writing here is some of the best ever. BJ is like, "How many kids have you killed today, Death said?" And this is, juxtaposed with all the crowd blasting. And then we get to the end of the level. Now, in 2014, we'd already started to move to darker games. Far Cry 3 was one of the games that popularized more adult stuff in gaming. But man, Wolfenstein New Order perfected it. You find a lab where people have been vivisected alive. It's utterly gruesome, but the game does not slow down and play some canned music. The nastiness is just there for the player to see. You then almost get crushed, and as the walls close in, we get some really good acting. It feels remarkably realistic. Fergus is a truly seasoned campaigner, and even though he's staring death in the face, he's completely unflappable. And then we get to the most important scene in the entire game. Most of the time in gaming, you're able to save the day, and if you play it right, you get all your dudes out. Here, not so much. You get captured by Death's Head, and he gives you a choice. Pick one of your friends to get killed. You can choose Cool Dude Fergus or Fresh-Faced Kid Wyatt. As you played through the first level, you got to know both. Fergus is a seasoned warrior with a quick wit and some of the best lines in the game. Wyatt is a fresh-faced newbie, but he does his best. It's a hard choice, and whichever one you choose, it's gonna be painful. But let's face it, no one's gonna choose Fergus. Sorry, Wyatt. When you select one, you're told that you will be playing the timeline of whichever one you chose. Eventually, you and Fergus escape the clutches of the bastard Death's Head. As you make your escape, BJ catches some shrapnel to the conch and then spends 14 years in the loony bin. This also seems a bit out of place as well. I wonder if the original game was supposed to be set in the 1960s, and this was a good plot device to get BJ there. So, in real life, the German socialist government was pretty bloody evil. They came up with the diabolical socialist T4 program. In short, if one had an incurable disability, you could and would end up being killed by your own government. And the Germans killed up to 40,000 of their own disabled people. They would literally drive gas vans to loony bins, like the one BJ is in, and then lead the people out to the gas vans to be killed, cause socialism. So, in the loony bin, BJ is still somewhat conscious and observes the family running it and falls in love with the beautiful nurse Anya. One day, the Germans show up and start killing everyone, cause, T4. Realistically, they wouldn't be shooting people and would just be putting them in a van on a short trip to Valhalla. After seeing the wanted slaughter, BJ forces his way back to consciousness and gets doing what he does best. He clears out the loony bin and rescues Anya, but sadly, Anya's parents have been killed. There is a little character bit here where BJ asks if Anya is okay to drive, and this encapsulates his character. BJ is basically Captain America, aka a good guy. BJ is legitimately heroic. He is fighting against a socialist authoritarian government that murders people who are not of any use to the state. But he is no bloodthirsty killer. He fights not because he loves the slaughter, but because he wants to protect the innocent. He is actually a kind and caring man, hence why he cares if a stranger is okay. The next scene is really tear-jerking. BJ and Anya head to Anya's grandparents' house. Anya has to give them the bad news that their kids have died at the hands of the Nazis. And Mick Gordon's soundtrack and the visuals all combine to make you, the player, feel their sense of loss. So, the Nazis have somehow been able to take over the world, and it's up to BJ to bust out the resistance fighters and wage a one-man war against socialism. First, you gotta get your threads. Anya's grandfather gives him a cool-ass coat, and you will wear that for the rest of the game, and is the best look BJ has ever bloody well had. You learn that the resistance fighters are being held in Eisenwald prison in Berlin, and so you fight the way to the German night train. On the train, you get the first of the new Wolfenstein tension moments. While getting coffee, you get waylaid by Frau Engel. She is a female SS officer, and she wants you to look at some pics to see if you are pure enough to live. It's pretty tense, and moments like this would become a staple of the series going forward. After getting back to the cabin, BJ gets to stabbing, in the good way. After the stabbing, BJ falls asleep, and in a really awesome transition, he wakes up in Berlin. The fight to the prison requires some stealth, and once you rescue Fergus, you can go loud. After busting him out, it's time to get down to business. He takes you to the Resistance HQ, and you learn that Caroline Becker also survived Wolfenstein 2009. Now that the gang is back together, it's time to figure out how to liberate, well, the world somehow? So you walk around Resistance HQ, and there are little newspaper clippings here and there, and you learn that the National Socialist German Workers' Party somehow took over the entire world, including the US. German fans, do y'all just get busy, like, all the time? Seriously, how are there that many Germans in this universe? Whatever, Diesel Punk. A fan pointed this out to me during a live stream, that the plot for Wolfenstein The New Order is basically that of Star Wars A New Hope. The BJ team are the Rebs, and the Germans are, well, as you'd expect, the Empire, and you gotta take them down. Sure, it's not possible at all that the Germans can take over the world, no matter how much sex the Germans had, but who cares? We got Diesel Punk Star Wars here, people. Your first mission is to steal some stealth helicopters. This has a really dark start. You have to go to London, and after the war, the National Socialists turned it into a benighted hellscape. No change there. To get into the building housing the stealth choppers, one of the resistance fighters drives a car bomb through the front bloody door. Yeah, 2014 was dark. You got a great boss battle against a Robro, and then you start to figure out just how the National Socialists won. See, I wasn't really being that ridiculous when I was saying they found the Great Void Dragon on Mars. You start finding some weird artifacts that are determined to be from the Da Yashud secret society. Now, you gotta find a member of said group. This leads to the most difficult mission of the game. You learn that you gotta find a guy named Seth Roth, and he just so happens to be in a concentration camp. This concentration camp is in Belica, Croatia, and this mission is really bloody hard to play, as it shows the sheer institutionalized brutality of the socialists. In real life, a Polish soldier did infiltrate a concentration camp to get proof that they existed at all. He eventually got that proof and escaped, but sadly was not believed. He would survive the war, but would be killed by another merry band of socialist psychopaths, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Now, back to the game. This camp is run by Frau Engel. Go figure. This mission is tough, and it really will take a major emotional toll on you as you play through it. But it has a kick-ass payoff. When you finally escape, you use the pincer of a mech to make the outside of Frau Engel look as bad as her inside. So, with the stress of the happy camp out of the way, it's time to steal an Unterseeboot so you can reach a Da Yashud tech cache. Now, the Da Yashud really needed to be aliens or something, or maybe time travelers? That'd make more sense. The explanation of who these guys happen to be is pretty dumb. So get this, a sect of a certain religion decided that the best way to pray was to invent amazing technology. And somehow this sect was able to make anti-gravity, AI, laser guns. Sure. Anyway, you smuggle yourself onto a U-boat, and you then clear it out. Now, you want to use the nukes that are on the sub, but you can't, because you got to have the launch codes. In order to get the launch codes, you got to get some documents, so you can go to the moon, where the launch codes are stored. In order to get those documents, you gotta blow up the Gibraltar Bridge. This level is pretty damn fun, but really bloody hard. Once you complete this, you're gonna fly to the moon and play among the stars. The moon level is bloody sweet. You fight moon Nazis with a laser rifle. You get the launch codes for the nukes, and when you head back to Earth, you immediately fight a giant robot called the London Monitor. The boss fight is okay. It's a bit too easy, to be honest, as there is plenty of cover and health packs. Before endgame, the Nat Sox attack the Resistance HQ. Now, throughout the game, you are given plenty of time to learn all about the Resistance fighters. You got Caroline, and she's a good leader. You have Klaus and Max Haas. Klaus is a former Nazi, but he's only former because his kid got caught up in the T4 program. He takes it upon himself to help out Max Haas. In 2014, Game of Thrones was still at the top of the charts, and Max Haas was based a bit upon the character Hodor, and as such can only say his name. Max Haas has some hidden depths. First, he is a rejected super soldier, and due to that rejection, his brain got melted. but some of his intelligence remains along with his super strength. Depending on which timeline you choose, you will also have one other character to get to know. If you picked Wyatt, you get Jimi Hendrix. He's cool, I guess, but his plotline is not nearly as good as that of Tekla. Tekla is a damaged woman. We never learn what was done to her, but she is completely nuts and is constantly going on about mathematical math. BJ eventually helps her learn to shoot so that she can defend herself. By this point in the game, you really do not want to see these people die, and it's a real tearjerker to see if you buy it. The romance between Anya and BJ is nothing short of excellent. Like with the rest of the characters, Anya is given a proper backstory, and her relationship with BJ is given time to grow, and while BJ gets to stabbing early on, you see them grow closer and closer emotionally throughout the game. It's a very natural relationship and does not feel forced or rushed. It seems that at least one of the devs has actually been with a girl and knows how real humans interact. And I gotta say, this is by far the best relationship I've seen in pretty much any FPS. Although, I will say, Doomguy's relationship with the BFG is a close second. Anya and a number of Resistance fighters get captured, but Max, Fergus, and Caroline make it out. So now, it's time to take down Death's Head once and for all. The final battle is really bloody fun, and it's really bloody hard. You thought that bridge was bad? I died more times in this level than in the entire bloody game. You eventually rescue Anya and the Resistance fighters, and then it's time to finish it. The final battle against Death's Head is really bloody emotional, and it starts on a real bloody gut punch. See, Death's Head is a piece of shit. When he killed your friend at the start of the game, he took his brain, and he's kept that brain in storage until now. He puts that brain in a robot, and you have to fight that bloody robot, and eventually you have to put your friend out of his misery. When you finally take the fight to the old bastard himself, this is a multi-phased boss fight. Death's Head shows up in a mech, and to make matters worse, he has Zeppelins feeding juice to his deflector shields. Thankfully, he foolishly set up 88mm flak guns in the right places. You blow the blimps and then knock his ass down an elevator shaft. This final phase of the boss fight is by far the hardest. No QTEs, no screw me lights, no extra health, no mounted weapons, just you going mono a bastard and you shoot him till you win. Once you damage his mech enough, he falls out and gets one last hit in, the little bastard. He blows himself up with a grenade and mortally wounds BJ. I gotta say, Death's Head is one of the great video game villains of all time. This sick bastard just does not give a fuck. He is evil and he bloody well knows it, and he is going to revel in that. And at the end, when you think you finally have him dead to rights, he pulls one last fuck you. A proper villain for a true hero. You catch some shrapnel, but live long enough to see Anya and the fighters get to T'Challa. And finally, Fergus asks if it's time to bring the nuclear fire, and BJ says yes. And with that, we cut to credits. Oh my god, this ending is nothing short of amazing. I love it when the devs don't think they'll get another game, because they just end. They don't give you any sequel hooks, just the end. Just the end. Over, finished, done, complete. So BJ dies at the end of this, and it's a great narrative choice. For one, how many Wolfenstein sequels do we bloody well need? And for another, we get a great emotional payoff. While I prefer to see the hero defeat the villain and get the girl, Wolf New Order is a World War II game, and a lot of those guys who fought in World War II didn't get the girl, and they didn't make it home. So ending the game where the hero dies drives home the point that in war, even the greatest of heroes are at the end of the day just human, and really that's what makes this game great. It's a game made by humans for humans. The writers wrote a story that played on real human emotions, and they created a universal story and did not inject a bunch of messages, man, and in so doing created a story that could reach gamers on a level unseen in just about any other bloody game. The devs delivered a product that shows that video games can be more than just dumb action. What we got here is enough story content to fill a bloody TV show. We have numerous fleshed out characters that each add to the plot. BJ fully comes into his own as a person and just continues to cement his status as one of the top 5 first-person shooter characters of all time. The game is fun, and all the bratwurst blasting is great, but the game does not glorify war and instead shows the real pain behind conflict and shows that being a badass has its downsides without making the player feel like a bastard for playing the goddamn game. It's a game with a broader human message that does not scrimp on why you are here in the first bloody place.
If this bloody game isn't the best first-person shooter ever, it's very close to it, at least in the top 5 of all time. If it's been 10 years since you've played the game, it's time to fire it up and have a good old time. And so, I am General Lotz, wishing you good Aliens vs. Predator 2 and good Doom 3, or whatever makes you happy.
If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing and please consider leaving a like or a comment, as the algorithm desires your soul. And I want to thank all those fans who have supported this channel, both past and present.